April 1943. Before the first light of dawn touched the Mediterranean, a lone British submarine moved silently through the freezing water. There were no explosions, no enemy ships in sight, yet everyone on board knew this mission could decide the fate of thousands. Hidden inside the submarine was a man who had already died, but whose final mission was only just beginning. Inside the dimly lit submarine, the crew stood quietly around a lifeless British officer wrapped in a military blanket. No one spoke. Every sailor understood they were saying goodbye to someone they had never truly known. He could no longer fight for his country, yet British intelligence believed he could still win one of the greatest battles of the war. British intelligence officers carefully attached a leather briefcase to the officer's wrist. Inside were documents marked "Top Secret," but the papers were completely false. Every signature, every letter, every military order had been created to deceive the enemy. If the Germans believed these documents, history itself could take a different path. Deep inside the submarine's command room, senior officers studied maps of Europe one final time. Sicily was the real target, but Germany had to believe the invasion would happen somewhere else. It was an unbelievable gamble. Success depended not on bullets or bombs, but on convincing the enemy to trust a carefully crafted lie. As the submarine slowly surfaced off the coast of Spain, thick fog covered the sea like a blanket. The cold morning air filled the deck as sailors quietly prepared for the most unusual operation of the Second World War. There would be no gunfire, only silence, and one final act of sacrifice. With complete respect, the crew carried the wrapped body onto the deck. Their faces reflected sadness, pride, and hope all at once. They knew this unknown man would never receive medals or applause. But if the mission succeeded, countless young soldiers fighting across Europe might live because of his final journey. As the sun slowly rose over the Mediterranean, the body slipped gently into the calm water. The waves carried him farther from the submarine with every passing second. No one saluted. No speeches were made. Only silence remained, as a dead man began perhaps the most important mission of World War II. For hours, the body drifted alone across the open sea toward the Spanish coastline. The ocean appeared calm, but every passing wave carried enormous risk. If the body disappeared, the mission would fail. If it reached the wrong hands, the deception would be exposed. Everything now depended on chance. Early that morning, Spanish fishermen noticed something unusual floating near the rocky shore. As they moved closer, they discovered the body of a British military officer. Chained securely to his wrist was a leather briefcase. Without realizing it, these fishermen had just become part of one of history's greatest intelligence operations. Spanish authorities quickly recovered the body and transported it to shore. At first glance, everything appeared completely normal. A drowned British officer carrying important military documents, exactly as British intelligence had planned. The trap had been set. Now came the most dangerous question of all. Would Hitler believe the lie? Behind closed doors, Spanish intelligence officers carefully unlocked the leather briefcase. Every document was handled with extreme caution. The letters looked authentic. The military papers appeared genuine. Even the smallest personal details felt real. British intelligence had understood one simple truth: people trust what feels human. Copies of the documents quietly made their way to German intelligence. Experienced officers examined every page, searching for signs of deception. Instead, they found exactly what Britain wanted them to see. The false invasion plan seemed completely believable, and the trap was beginning to close. A military courier rushed through the corridors of Berlin carrying the classified reports. Every minute mattered. Senior commanders immediately recognized the importance of the information. If these documents were genuine, they could reveal exactly where the Allies planned to strike next. Inside his wartime headquarters, Adolf Hitler carefully studied the captured documents. The reports appeared convincing. Every signature, every detail, every official stamp reinforced the same conclusion. The Allied invasion, he believed, would target Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. Britain's deception was working exactly as planned. German generals gathered around a massive map of Europe to discuss their next move. After hours of debate, they agreed to reinforce Greece and Sardinia. It was a decision made with complete confidence, yet none of them realized they had based it on one carefully crafted lie. Soon, long columns of German tank trucks and soldiers rolled toward Greece. Valuable aircraft and defensive equipment followed. Every convoy that left Sicily weakened the island's defenses. Without firing a single shot, Britain had convinced Germany to move its own army away from the real battlefield. Across Sicily, defensive positions slowly became less prepared than they had been only weeks before. Fewer soldiers guarded the coastline. Fewer weapons stood ready. The island still looked heavily defended, but beneath the surface, dangerous gaps had begun to appear. Far away, British and American commanders watched intelligence reports arrive one after another. Intercepted communications confirmed the unbelievable news. German forces were moving exactly where the fake documents had suggested. Months of planning had paid off. The impossible deception had become reality. As dawn approached, one of the largest invasion fleets ever assembled crossed the Mediterranean. Thousands of soldiers stood silently aboard ships, unaware that a dead stranger had helped make this moment possible. Their mission was dangerous, but the odds had just become far more favorable. Landing craft raced toward the beaches as explosions echoed across the coastline. Allied troops stormed onto Sicilian soil under heavy fire. The battle would still be fierce, but thanks to Operation Mincemeat, the enemy was weaker than expected. The greatest deception of the war had opened the door to Europe. The Allied invasion pushed deeper into Sicily. British, American, and Canadian troops fought through rugged hills, dusty villages, and determined resistance. Every mile they gained came at a terrible cost. Yet with German forces spread too thin, the Allies advanced faster than many commanders had expected. German soldiers began withdrawing from key positions, fighting fiercely as they retreated through shattered Sicilian towns. Smoke filled the sky, and damaged vehicles lined the roads. Their discipline remained strong, but it was becoming painfully clear that the island could no longer be defended as planned. Back in London, British intelligence officers quietly followed the battlefield reports. They didn't celebrate with cheers or applause. Instead, they exchanged silent smiles, knowing their months of planning had worked. One carefully planned deception had saved countless lives before the first shots were even fired. The men behind Operation Mincemeat remained in the shadows. Their names were unknown to the public, and their success remained classified. History often remembers the soldiers on the front lines, but this victory was also won by brilliant minds armed with patience, imagination, and extraordinary attention to detail. Behind the false identity of Major William Martin was a real human being named GlynDWR Michael, whose body became part of the operation after his death. He never volunteered for this mission, yet his story became forever linked with one of history's greatest acts of wartime deception. To make Major William Martin believable, British intelligence created an entire life. Love letters, family photographs, receipts, bank statements, and even theater tickets filled his pockets. Every tiny detail made him feel like a real person, and that human touch convinced the enemy. The deception had achieved something almost unimaginable. One false identity had influenced the decisions of an entire military command. Germany shifted valuable troops away from Sicily, believing the fake invasion plan. It proved that in war, information can sometimes be more powerful than weapons. The successful invasion of Sicily marked a major turning point in the war. It opened the road into Italy and increased pressure on the Axis powers. Within weeks, political turmoil shook Italy, and the balance of the conflict began to shift in favor of the Allies. For years, Operation Mincemeat remained hidden behind locked government files. The public had no idea how close the mission had come to failure, or how one extraordinary plan had helped shape the future of Europe. Some of the greatest victories in history remain invisible for decades. Historians still consider Operation Mincemeat one of the most successful intelligence operations ever carried out. It wasn't one with overwhelming firepower or superior numbers. It was won through trust, careful planning, and a story convincing enough to fool one of the most powerful dictators in history. The success of Operation Mincemeat proved that wars aren't won by strength alone. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon is a believable story. A single act of deception changed the plans of an entire army and helped shape the future of Europe. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill understood that intelligence could save thousands of lives. Behind every major victory stood countless hours of planning, secrecy, and sacrifice. Operation Mincemeat became a perfect example of how strategy could succeed where brute force alone could not. As Allied forces liberated towns across Sicily, frightened civilians slowly stepped out from hiding. Children smiled for the first time in months. Families embraced the soldiers who had arrived to free them. In the middle of war, hope quietly returned to the streets, but victory always came with a price. Across the battlefield, broken vehicles, abandoned equipment, and silent memories reminded everyone that every success was paid for by human lives. Behind every military map were families forever changed by war. The man known to the world as Major William Martin never received applause during the war. His greatest contribution remained a secret for years. Yet without speaking a single word, he he helped protect thousands of soldiers who would never know his name. Operation Mincemeat became a lesson taught in intelligence agencies around the world. It proved that careful planning, patience, and understanding human psychology could influence battles long before the first soldier reached the battlefield. Years later, classified files were finally opened, allowing historians to uncover the incredible truth. What once sounded like an impossible legend was supported by real documents, real people, and one of the most daring deception operations ever carried out. Today, Operation Mincemeat is remembered as more than a military success. It is remembered as a story of courage, imagination, and sacrifice. It reminds us that history is often shaped by ordinary people placed in extraordinary circumstances. The name Major William Martin never truly belonged to a real officer, but the man behind that identity, Gyndwr Michael, became an unexpected part of history. His final journey helped change the course of World War II, ensuring that his story would never be forgotten. As the sun sets over the calm Mediterranean Sea, the waves erase every trace of the mission that once unfolded here. The submarine is gone, the briefcase is gone, but the impact remains. One silent sacrifice, one brilliant deception, and one unforgettable story that changed history forever.